our construction department, after they performed the evaluation on all the schools, had asked and had presented, I think, to CapFin last year and or to JAC, his desire to kind of do the same type of mapping on all state buildings. And it was my recollection that that may have been already started or underway, or at least was in at least the contemplation and discussion realm.
Mr. Chairman, we do have, LSO has an answer to that. We can answer that question.
Madam Chairman and Representative Nicholas, your recollections are correct that last year the JAC was approached by the State Construction Department to do some work to develop a strategic plan for facilities for the state, and that resulted in House Bill 86, which went through this session and was adopted. And so while I don't know that it at this point in time encompasses Senator Crum's idea about estimating the full deferred cost of maintenance, it is a very significant start to that type of a process. And I think the goal of that bill is to establish a strategic plan for maintaining statewide facilities.
And so just to follow up on that, Madam Chairman and committee, my guess is that in order to do what Senator Crum is talking about will involve hiring an outside third party and then conducting that review of all state buildings. And that would probably take about a year to accomplish, assuming we have an outside party doing it. And if that's the case, I'm not sure that we need 8 hours that he's talking about, but we could have Department of Construction come and in other words, have Delbert come and kind of walk through what he suggested and talked about, which resulted in House Bill 86, and what those next steps are, which I imagine would be retaining an outside entity to perform this function, and to go to bid on that, and just to find out how much it would cost, and have us outline exactly what they would be looking at in a study like that. And so it would be fairly perfunctory, I think, to, if this committee wanted to pursue it, to have that presentation and then essentially put that in either in the budget or in some type of a product for the budget session.
All right, thank you, Representative Nicholas. Representative Pendergraph.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's too many pop-up things in my way here. I'm just wondering if part of this discussion is going to consider divesting ourselves of some of these properties. When Senator Crum mentioned allowing them to deteriorate, I thought, wouldn't it be better if we're not going to fix the buildings, if we're not going to maintain them properly, maybe we should just get rid of them. Would that be part of the discussion as well?
Senator Crum.
Madam Chairman, Representative Pendergraph, I think that's fine. I think everything that Representative Nicholas talked about, I think an idea, let's get our arms around it. It may take a year to fully understand what this problem is, but let's start the process. And it sounds like it may have already been started. So let's continue to complete the process and really understand what the issue is. That's really my concern as we move forward. So all this sounds fine to me.
All right, thank you, Senator Crum. And I'll just maybe provide some direction to the committee right now for interim topics, which we'll go through all of these proposed interim topics for the purpose of this meeting. As we go through, or immediately thereafter, if you would number them, the order of priority for which you wish to hear them for the interim, and then email them back to myself and Representative Baer, and then we'll go ahead and determine the interim topics from there. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I too agree it's an important topic. We did pass 86, but we didn't fund it. So that would be kind of one sticking point. But I think it'd be great to hear from Del about what his plan is. And I think that he could, with passing the bill and just that it wasn't fully funded, he'd asked for $750,000 and we cut it out. But you know, actually having him come in and maybe talk to us would be something to get him going and maybe refine those numbers and talk about those very issues about disposing of buildings and whatever. So maybe not 8 hours, but I think a good idea.
All right, any final comments on this topic number 1?
Madam Chairman, I do have one comment, and I should have brought it to you before we actually got started at all. Do you want me to go through, obviously, Management Council will approve our topics. That comes in their meeting on, April 8th. We are a statutory task force rather than a standing committee, and so we have a little different charge in our statutes than most other committees do. I don't know if the new committee members are aware of what that is. Do you want me to go over that, or do you want, I can give you a citation if you'd like?
Yeah, please go over that now as everyone
Okay.
determines their topics.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier. This is in Wyoming Statute 2811-201, which is the part of the statutes that talk about all the select committees. This is the Select Committee on Capital Financing and Investments. It describes in paragraph B what our charge is. So the Select Committee shall select from its members a chairman and a vice chairman, and the rest of these are substantive topics. Monitor the establishment and implementation of state investment policy by the State Loan and Investments Board, including the extent to which investment goals are being achieved. Number 3, monitor the establishment and implementation of state capital financing policy by the State Building Commission and any other state entity charged with capital financing. Number 4, prepare and submit recommendations of legislature, including sponsoring legislation to improve statutes related to the investment of state and local government funds. Number 5, develop knowledge and expertise among its members regarding issues related to the investment of public funds and capital financing. 4, and finally, monitor state funds invested for a specific public purpose. Now, public purpose or investments are a specific part of investments from some of our permanent funds that are done outside of this committee, and we monitor those every year. There aren't a lot of yearly expenditures in that category. So, and that again is at 2811-201, if you'd like to look at that, or I can submit that to the committee after we're done here as well.
Thank you. Any questions to Mr. Shaw regarding our statutory obligations for the committee? All right. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Going on to number 2, the generational fund constitutional amendment. I see that, I think Treasurer Meyer is in the room there. This was submitted by Don Williams, his deputy. And of course, I think there was a bill this past session dealing with this topic as well. So with that, Treasurer Meyer?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we've had a little bit of discussion, especially in the Senate on this, because it reached the floor. And I know that there's another one here, I think by Senator Dixon Driscoll is asking for the same topic. Essentially, this is probably the right way to do a generational fund, because then the funds are locked up to where you can't spend them, and that's really the reason why you want a generational fund type of construct, is because that's where you get your added return in compounding, and that's so you're making money on your money. And so that's essentially the goal is to keep the money for a longer period of time, so you can get the liquidity premiums on your investments, and then be able to replace the lost dollars that we have from our coal and oil and natural gas. Just coal alone, we're at somewhere between $500 and $600 million deficit, and that deficit has occurred over the last several years, but expected to increase. So what it's trying to do is over time be able to make sure that we don't have to use any other income structures to make sure the same purchasing power that is in the budgets remain generally close to the same.
Okay, and committee, for purposes of understanding, this topic is the same as the next topic, generally speaking. So Senator Driscoll, do you have anything you'd like to add on this topic?
Sorry, having a hard time get off mute. No, not really. You know, we passed it through the Senate, and I think there's a base understanding, at least in the Senate, but it's a good topic. It makes sense for Wyoming. But we'll see where it takes us.
All right, any questions from the committee regarding what was Senate File 197? Okay, yeah,
Madam Chairman,
Representative Bear?
thank you. I just have a suggestion. When I look at these topics, 2 and 3, we obviously agree are very similar, but I think 6 and 8 are related as well. And when we all take a look at these and send in our thoughts, we should probably just consider that one large subject matter dealing with investments and education funding via investment. And then I see the same thing with items 4 and 5. So maybe a little grouping. 1 is by itself, 2, 3, 6, and 8 are together, 4 and 5 are together, and then 7 is by itself. Just a suggestion.
No, I think that's spot on. When we get there, I think we'll do that. That's a usual challenge with interim topics. They do overlap, most of them. So items 2 and 3 are the same and together. So when you identify that, you make sure that that's there. The next topic is long-term direct distribution presented by the County Commissioners Association. I don't know if there was a legislative sponsor for this or if they're available for this meeting. They are. Yeah, if we could let Mr. Riemann in.
Madam Chairman, he's joining as a panelist. Just a moment.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I know this topic has been submitted elsewhere, but in conversations with a number of you, including Senator Hicks, we thought that this committee has perhaps the bandwidth as well as the education to take up a conversation around direct distribution and alternative funding sources. You looked at least in the Senate, a concept that would take a portion of the state portion of sales and use tax and redistribute that through the direct distribution formula. That's certainly something we could look at. Bringing it to your attention and would appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Riemann. Any questions for Mr. Riemann? So, Mr. Riemann, I see that you have on here about 60 to 90 minutes per meeting. And do you believe it's limited to that amount because of the work previously done on Senate File 60?
Madam Chairwoman, yes, I think that there is Senate File 60. We've also looked at various concepts over time that we could bring forward. They're already in the pipeline. I don't see this taking a tremendous amount of time.
All right. Well, thanks for being here with us today this afternoon, Mr. Riemann. We appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair,
Representative Nicholas?
so there are multiple different issues involving sales and use tax. So I would think that as a primer, before we get in and delve down into redistribution and all those things, that it would probably take probably half a day at least to walk through the history of sales tax, what the current distribution is, who the beneficiaries are, where those dollars go and how they're used, and what impacts that would have if you begin redistributing the total number of dollars available. And then the requisite impact, obviously we want to have all those impacted folks come and testify about it. So I think it's a more complicated issue than just topic number 4. And particularly when you're going into combining it with components of additional dollars for or offsetting cuts to our funds for education. I mean, it's. I just think we have to recognize it for what it is in order to make any type of good recommendations and have a full understanding of it. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just thinking it's going to take work and background.
Further discussion? All right, going on to the next topic, which is review and make recommendation of sales and use tax distribution. And this is from both Senate File 60 and House Bill 33, connected to a portion of that sales and use tax going to WYDOT. If I could just get a raised hands about how many of you think this should be lumped into number 4, which is sales and use tax distribution for perhaps cities, towns, and counties? Or do you see them as distinctly different? All right, if everybody could raise their hand at the same time. Yeah, all in favor, please raise your hand. So I have 3, Representative Baer, Representative Pendergraph, Representative Nicholas, and Representative Haraldson. All those, and Senator Crum, was that you too? Okay, that's 5. All those who think they are separate and distinct and shouldn't think they should be the same interim topic, if you could please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a tie vote. I do think that, I mean, they could easily be 1, but for the purposes of CapFin and having something manageable, I think they should be separated in order to not get into a complete remake of our sales and use tax distribution model. So that's the tie-breaking vote. So those are separate topics, so that doesn't change the outcome. You can prioritize them however you want, but they would just be separate topics. Senator Driscoll, I know that you worked heavily on this on the Senate side on the amendment concerning House Bill 33, sales and use tax distribution formula for WYDOT. Would you like to speak to this topic?
I can. I mainly dealt with it just because of the shortage of WYDOT as far as where it falls. But I do think it's a topic that actually needs looked at and kind of, and it delves down into when we took WYDOT Game and Fish off the general fund. I think a little bit of history on it's probably good. I don't know if there's a lot of action to be taken, but probably agree with where Senator Nicholas is at. Is good background on it would be helpful to everybody.
All right, Senator Guru?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think it'd be good to hear from WYDOT too, is what they see as how best to use this revenue stream for its maximum effect. I know on the Senate side, and I don't know how the House discussion went. I know on the House or on the Senate side, there weren't any amendments necessarily, as I recall, but I think there was a lot of talk about it going for roads. There may have been amendments on there. I'd really like to hear from WYDOT what's the best use of this money, leveraging it with federal money, using it on its own, highway construction, vertical construction, any needs that they have, so we can maximize the use of each dollar and not lock ourselves into a position before we hear that from them. I don't know if we necessarily have to listen to that, maybe refine the law itself, but just make sure that we're doing it the best possible way. I think it's it's a big investment of our capital.
Senator Crum?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this is a really important subject too, whether it's combined with another one, which now it's not going to be really immaterial. But I do think this is one of the priorities that we really need to look at very hard, is how do we maintain our roads? How do we leverage the dollars we have to maximize them? And how do we take care of those roads? So I'm strongly in favor of this.
And then Senator Driscoll.
Yeah, I just, clarification for Senator Grew and everyone else. We did amend it and it can only be spent on secondary roads, non-interstate, and on flat roads, not on anything vertical. So that was part of it, but I thoroughly agree with Senator Grew as far as bringing YDOT in, talking with them and talking about how they're going to prioritize it, mainly try to keep them from having worse shortages in the future, how they can leverage it to its best advantage to the state. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the next topic, which is submitted by Senator Hicks as well. Review of long-term stability of K through 12 school finance. And then to develop alternative investment and sources of contribution to finance K through 12. Would anyone like to speak to this? And then I'm curious as to how, maybe Senator Driscoll, you see this interplaying with the intergenerational wealth fund.
I guess I can start on a little. Senator Meyer or Treasurer Meyer will probably have to comment some as well. I felt like it tied in very well to a generational wealth fund that basically when you look at it, probably the biggest problem we have coming, and Senator Hicks alluded to that, is going to be financing education, both structural and actual costs. We can see too by any amount that we're going to have a shortfall. So I do think it toes back in as it's a elephant in the room as far as if we don't deal with K-12 finance, it's a sure path to an income tax or some type of tax increase, which I think we all agree in Wyoming, if we can avoid it at any cost, that's the best path. So I do think this is reasonably important. I'm not sure exactly how we address it. I'd like to hear a little from Treasurer Meyer on it, probably.
I do see, I can't physically see you very well, Treasurer Meyer, but I see you're there now, if you're willing to talk.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I think there's a use case to be made both for funding education and for funding other areas besides just replacing, the revenue that we have now. I think it works better with the structural one because you've got some time before the buildings are at its useful end of life. And that gives you a longer time to actually invest your money and making money with your money. It also, to the extent that in later years that you can pull off some of that to handle your external cost of adjustments. I do think that there could be some lean years in there, which we're gonna have to, do something, I think, proactively with the cost of education in some way. I'm not making any suggestions on how, this committee would do that, nor do I want to cross the line outside of my area of expertise with my office now. But in private, I'd share those with anybody. But yeah, I think you can make a good argument on the use case on this. You can make a good argument on the use case of the areas of lost revenue. And there's other use cases you can make as far as fixing our retirement deficit. There's a use case on that. But the thing is that we have to remember is that another use case could be supplementing tax rebates or abatement to the energy companies. So we've got our energy that we can the best place to drill in 20 or 30 years. But structure you have to remember is that you want to try to keep a constant amount of money in the first area, or increasing as through all of them, because it's kind of like a computer program, garbage in, garbage out. If you got a set amount of money that you're going to have pretty much in the future, then you can make those long-term plans. And I think with a little modeling, you guys can derive what those long-term amounts you're gonna need. And the good work of Craig, you can probably enter into their projections out there. Of course, projections are really good. They're more like guesses when you get 20, 30, 40 years out. But still, it's a good way to arrive at a median of what the guesses might be.
All right, thank you, Treasurer Meyer. With that, we will move on to the next proposed interim topic with Senator Guru, which is gaming, continuing to hunt me. To develop a uniform plan for the consolidation and distribution of gaming receipts, which I do think is an important thing to look at. Not sure for the committee, but it is important. Senator Guru, do you want to walk us through this?
Sure, Madam Chairman, thanks. And I didn't do it just to piss you off. I really didn't, not to have gambling follow you wherever you go. But some of it, we've been talking about all these gaming laws, and really what it comes down to for a lot of us is where's the money going? So I thought, well, why don't we just, some of us just talk, why don't we turn that around the other way and just say, okay, let's go about it from the money side. See where these, there's a labyrinth of where each dollar goes as it comes in from different forms of gaming. And maybe just take a look at it, familiarize ourselves with it and say, is this where we want to go? And maybe it'll help crystallize thinking about gaming laws as they come forward, or we might just want to take a look at how we invest that money, how we spread that money across the enterprise and say, maybe there's a better way. That's it.
Questions for Senator Guru? All right, moving on to the next topic.
Just to comment on that for a bit.
Yeah, Representative Nicholas.
If you go back up and look at what we just talked about in number 4 or 5 in terms of finding dollars for schools through gaming, and regardless of where the money is going to be used for, I think that we lack a fairly good comprehension of how much money is out there and what's available. The fact is that there's over $2 billion of churn right now, and that number is only going up. And the other component is the state just doesn't get that much money out of it. We just don't, and that doesn't make sense to me. The locals get their dollars out of it, but I think we have a $5.5 million kind of cap on what we get and how it comes in. And it's 0.05% is my recollection of what that number is. We had to understand all those numbers before we can redirect the funding or increase the amount that we take from the take. So all those components kind of wrap into the same topic. And if this committee doesn't do it, then I hope that some committee does, because it's a gorilla in the room, but no one's really touched or poked at. We poked at it in appropriations last year for a while. We came up with about 4 different bills, but only one of them saw the light of day. I just think it's something we need to have control over, and at a minimum, get a moratorium on what the process is, so that it doesn't continue to become a bigger monster as we go down the road.
Thank you, Representative Nicholas. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none. The next and final topic, which I would just say committee is probably our most important topic and potentially one of our easiest topics, but one that I think we will be taking up this interim. And so appreciate your vote on this. And this is redefining income as earnings. We have Treasurer Meyer here with us. As you know, this past year we passed the House Joint Resolution 1, I guess it was 1, that was a different number, where we authorized that. Now we have to move forward with the statutory revision based on that House Joint Resolution of income to earnings. So I'll turn it over to Treasurer Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This, I think, is one of Patrick and Don's number one goals is to get that change from income to earnings. For me, I think it will make accounting a lot easier and actually transactions. So let's say now that you're looking to have $500 million that you'll be spending. So part of that you can get through your interest and dividends or your normal investments, say half of it. The other $250 million is going to have to come with unrealized capital gains. So if you made 10% on that, you're gonna have to put out a large chunk, probably about $2.5–3 billion that the sales that you're gonna have to make of either stocks or something else with the gain, with that 10% gain in it. And that's really, really hard to do. Now, when you have earnings, if you need $500 million, all you have to do is sell $500 million worth of stocks or bonds or whatever, the face value, and then you have your $500 million worth of earnings. And so it makes accounting a lot easier. It makes the transactional cost a lot easier because immediately after you sell those stocks, you have to reinvest them right back into the market, but you're going to reinvest and buy less stocks than you did because you stripped off that 10% gain. So you're going to have 90% of the stocks that you normally had, where very often that you could sell something in earnings and actually keep a larger percentage of whatever asset class that you want to keep your money in. So it does a lot of things. It frees up your asset allocation as far as how you do that within a fund or a pool. And it also makes it easier to derive a steady flow of money that can be used for spending. So that's kind of what you're trying to do. It's essentially called the endowment model. The endowment model has less restrictions on it as far as the risk. So the risk may go up a little bit and may be closer to what the retirement system does than what we're doing now. They're about a point and a half higher than standard deviation, and the returns are slightly better than what we are now for total return. So it will add to the ability to make more money, and it'll add to the ease of guaranteeing that we're going to have the spending policy. The one thing that you have to remember is that in earnings, you would have several billion dollars available that would be basically specified or as a definition of earnings. And so when you do this, at the same time, you have to put a restriction in the Constitution of the spending policy. That's a political decision. Right now, I don't know where that 4.5% passed, but you need to make sure that you have that, because right now there's a restriction that's built into the Constitution because you're only getting interest and dividends and realized capital gains. And it frees it up to where everything that you sell can be used for spending. And so you could spend down all of the money down to the corpus in a matter of the will of the legislature, 50+1 votes. And that's a scary proposition. So I think what you have to do when you look at this, know that this makes life a lot easier. It makes things easier for accountants. It makes it easier for investment. It makes it easier for the legislators to know that they'll have that spending policy there. But one thing that you do need to remember is that you have to put that into context with the purchasing power of what's being out of these constitutional permanent funds. Because the purchasing power basically is going to cross over in 5 to 8 years on the permanent mineral trust fund, that the nominal growth is going to exceed the purchasing power. And the school fund is going to be probably somewhere around 10 years plus or minus 2, where the nominal growth of that will not be large enough to actually carry the purchasing power of what that's been able to purchase as far as education. So you can't really give it a big number like 8% or something like that, even though you could use it for a while. In a very, very short time, you would just drain the purchasing power for future generations. So you want to make sure that you have something in there that you know that we can meet and maintain that purchasing power. And that would, I guess, put you on a glide path that you know that future generations would have the same purchasing power as current generations. Now, if that's not important to you, then I'll distinctly disagree that it should be something that's very important, and I'll have to talk to you.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I had a question since I wasn't in the Senate when the Driscoll Amendment was debated. on that very issue. I think there was a spending policy that was discussed, and was curious if somebody that was in the Senate when that was presented could tell us what was discussed then.
Senator Driscoll, are you available?
Short of that, maybe the treasurer could tell us, give us an example of, or an idea what he thinks an appropriate spending policy amount would be, since he
I can
mentioned
tell you
8% would work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman. I can tell you that the spending policy that New Mexico put into place when they switched over to earnings was 5%. And then they thought that was too much, so they went down to 4%. This is a constitutional one. Then they wanted to spend more money, so they went up to 6%. Then they found out that they were spending too much money, so they went back down to 5%. So I would say is that let's let the math aside. Let's go ahead and run the numbers and see what earnings we need on our expectations of nominal income as to what our expectations would be, what we would have to have a spending policy at, to make sure that we don't go below that line and we continue to have the same amount of money that's available from investments be available in future years. And I would say that number most likely will range somewhere between 3.5% and 4.5%. And if you put in the Constitution, can't exceed a range of 4.5%, nor shall it be less than 3.5%, then I think that would probably be the range. Now, I haven't gone over the numbers recently, but I think you get some updated numbers and maybe characterize it in the Constitution that it's an amount, spending policy would be amount that is dictated by maintaining the purchasing power of the distributions. And that would be a way so the math could be calculated every year and maybe put a range in there. I don't like legislating the Constitution. Is if you could make it really simple, and maybe 5% would be, not exceed 5% would be a simple way to make sure you couldn't get into too much trouble, because we've had that and we haven't been into too much trouble to date. But if we maintain that in another 5 to 8 years in the permanent Mineral Trust Fund, absent some miraculous increases in income, we're going to have
Madam Chairman.
problems.
Yeah, Senator Driscoll, did you hear the question about your amendment?
I did not. I'm sorry, I stepped out.
No, that's okay. So we'll come back to you. We'll go to Representative Nicholas, but I'll just tell you what the question was so you can prepare your thoughts.
Yeah, and
We're on
so,
the last topic, and the question was about your amendment in the Senate to House Joint Resolution 1. So I'll go to Representative Nicholas, and then if you could speak to that in a minute. Representative Nicholas?
thank you, Madam Chairman. And so in the past, when we've had the same discussion last year, and actually even the year before. And so what we discussed in the past was we need to make the language broad enough so that the spending policy will be a derivative, basically, if all of a sudden interest rates go back up to 8 or 9%, and if that's the case, then that means that your money market is going to be paying 6 or 7%. So you have to have flexible in order to cover the ups and downs of the U.S. economy and our own economy at the same time. And so to benchmark, you can benchmark it, offer a pro and con, like 2 or 3% above or below what the prime rate is or some other component of it, but you have to have it flexible enough that, particularly in the Constitution, that you don't want to come back in and change it all the time. New Mexico has repeatedly changed their Constitution because they locked it in stone, and that's just an example of what not to do, I think. So you just want to have enough leeway on both sides that we give the power to the legislature then to kind of assess it within a certain amount of reasonable parameters.
I just want to remind the committee for where we are, which is just determining interim topics. And then we'll delve into this topic for sure. This is squarely within our statutory obligation to do. But Senator Driscoll?
Madam Chair, I just looked it up and it was a Hicks amendment, not a Driscoll amendment. So I'll just get with him and discuss that.
Yeah,
with him.
Madam Chairman, I was a bit baffled. I just went and pulled up and looked. It's a Hicks. Thank you.
All right. Any further questions on this topic? All right, seeing none, Mr. Shaw. Kind of walking, yeah, and Mr. Fuller, I guess, both of you, just briefly, are there any topics that you see on this interim topic list that you think are not within our statutory framework?
Well, Madam Chairman, that's a good question. I mean, I think that our statutory framework is fairly narrow. You know, and I've always described it as being on the investment side rather than the distribution side. So things like, I mean, you know, that includes a lot of things. I mean, as we know, every committee has exercised various levels of commitment to their standard topics. We are a statutory committee, though, unlike others, the interim committees, in that we have an actual statutory charge, which is more, you know, potentially more limiting, because other committees, you know, will handle everything that comes in front of, you know, the military department or the transportation department. Those are very broad. Whereas this one tends to and has traditionally focused on that one side of the equation. That leaves committees like revenue or joint appropriations committees to more traditionally view with the distribution of funds. That's my only consideration. Now, and you know, I think that some of these topics are not on the investment side of that equation. Having said that, you know, this committee's interim topics have fluctuated from year to year, and frankly, Management Council is the one who ultimately decides, and they haven't always been real, you know, nitpicky in what they approve and don't approve for committees. So I think that's my piece. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Mr. Fuller, anything that you see that is outside of our statutory duties?
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, I just leave it to what Ian said. And the only other thing I would add is the legislature itself has actually assigned topics to this committee in 2020 and 2021 through legislation concerning various topics. The legislature directed this committee to study various issues as well.
All right, thank you. With that committee, we've heard those interim topics as previously mentioned. What I would ask you to do is to just prioritize via number and then provide your prioritization topics back to myself and Representative Baer. We will share them with Mr. Fuller and Mr. Shaw and team, and then have you take a look at our letter to be presented to Management Council for our proposed interim topics. Any final comments on our interim topic meeting? Senator Garreau?
Chairman?
Yeah. Thanks, Madam Chairman. Did you want to try to group any of those up, or do you just want to let us go from 1 to 8? I mean, I do agree with you. I think the last one is kind of a no-brainer that we should be at least looking at drawing up for the body to decide, but maybe I'm missing something on that, but that was my question.
So in my experience, having chaired committees for a long time now, I think it's probably best to just number them. There's not so many interim topics here that is unwieldy, and then let the chairman, myself, Representative Baer, kind of understand how, based on those priorities, they can be
lumped,
placed into a larger umbrella. And that once we understand those priorities, that can be more easily done. So, you know, I just had previously identified the topics that were the same to make sure maybe those weren't numbered twice. But in the event you do that, we'll obviously evaluate that accordingly and eliminate your vote on that one and go down the list.
Madam Chair.
That's my thoughts on that. Yes, Representative Nicholas.
So I do have a question for the chairs. If there are any additional topics that either the House Vice Chair or you bring up, typically we don't limit it to what's on this list, but now that we have the committee in front of us, and in the past we've said, okay, anything else that is relevant or would be useful to this committee. And then what we didn't really talk about is essentially kind of the get-go or the first meeting, having an educational primer for all members, but particularly the newer ones, that goes through our investment, all of the funds, where we're at, how we got to where we are, where our dollars are, how they're being spent, what literally and what we've done in the past 10 or 15 years to improve our investment positions, and what other options there are to continue down that road, and new and more creative or possible changes to our investment policies and procedures that we've developed over the course of the last 15 or 20 years.
Yeah, Representative Nicholas, that's typically what I do when we start off the interim for the new members, is to kind of have a refresh and maybe a little primer or tutorial on the history of what the committee does and our investment policy. So we'll make sure to set aside some time for that. Do you have any separate topics apart from what we've gone over today that you would like us to consider or the committee to consider?
The only thing that I have that I would just, that I think we can wrap within the sales tax provisions, that because there's two different, or almost three different topics that cover that issue. And that is that particularly with the actions that we took on property taxes over this year, you know, because we've had several bills in the House side that talk about substituting like a half a penny sales tax for up to 25% of the first 500,000 on property tax relief. And by doing so, we literally create one of the largest tax cuts for the state of Wyoming in history for property owners. You go down from a contribution of around $1,200 a year to $140 a year per household of four. And so at the same time, we eliminate the burden of sales tax that we have just created with an increase of 0.4% of the sales tax. That would be part of that restructuring of our sales tax commitments. It was discussed several times on the House floor, and the concept from the House was it needs to be studied and understood. If it really works that way, then why wouldn't we do it? Why wouldn't we have 4.5 million people paying into our coffers rather than 190,000 homeowners across the state of Wyoming? Because the distribution is, and only, you know, over a third of it is paid by out-of-staters. And so it'd be a property tax in the form of a property tax relief for people, at the same time lowering taxes, but then providing a different avenue of property taxes, because that's the bane of our tax structure at this current time. And so it'd be a first step in the restructuring of our financing and how we finance our state government.
Do you like to simplify your proposed interim topic into 10 words or less?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
That's three.
Please start now. Go, what are your 10 words or less?
It's just consideration of an increase in the sales tax and a reduction of property tax in terms of our tax structure.
All right.
Sales tax is a replacement for property tax.
Great. And so, you know, committee, what I would also suggest, due to kind of the constraint that we have here and these topics, so, you know, you can leave some notes for us on your prioritization and say, we'd like to take up the topic of sales tax and within this here, and we can evaluate that accordingly to try to see the will of the committee and what everyone's interests are, and try to understand what you'd like to do for the interim and how we want to serve the people. So I would just, you know, lend that flexibility to provide some notes along the side when it comes to some of these other kind of umbrella topics. Senator Driscoll?
I was just gonna, if it was in order, make a motion to just take number 8 off the table and just make it one of our ones. You'd brought it up. I think we all agree it's necessary. It just saves the ranking. Just go ahead and deal with it today and have it done. I think everybody agrees unanimously that it needs to come forward. Absent objection.
I just don't want to I appreciate everyone trying to determine rankings and all that. I just don't want to make any confusion. So the redefining income as earnings, you know, I haven't consulted with Representative Bear, but it will be an interim topic and something that this committee is really statutory.
That's why I brought it up. If it's just going to be one, we just well pull it off the list, just make it number one and
That's a
cement it
really
in.
great thought. Co-Chairman Bear, do you agree with that?
I do not object to that. That's
Okay,
Okay.
fine.
It solved
So-
us all a little bit. Thank you.
yep, great. Absent anyone else wanting to do something more efficiently with the way the meeting is being managed, any other substantive comments? Senator Guru.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. I agree. I have no problem at all with voting and then letting the chair and the co-chair group up where if they see some grouping to happen. I think leaving that to you guys is great. I did have a question though for Treasurer Meyer, if I just take a second. Wanted to ask him if either now or for our first meeting, just I know that Mr. Treasurer, our Patrick is departing as CIO, and just wanted to hear how a replacement search is going, who's involved with it, and just kind of a framework of that, and then maybe even a timeline. If you could help with that, it'd be great.
Right. Well, we asked the IFC Cecilia to take a look at what we proposed for job postings and see if they had any ideas. We're considering those suggestions that they're moving forward. We probably won't change it a lot because we've got an expert, Gary Hookpole, that's doing the headhunting on this one. He's had really good success in the way he's put things together. We've been following his lead. He's the guy that's getting paid to do it. We will consider the request of the ISC members, but probably won't be a big change in what he's put out. We'll probably have that posting here ready to go with hopefully by the end of this week. Then we'll move on. Don, I see Don on there. Don has been working directly with this. So, Don, why don't you give us the update on your calendar?
Don, welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman and Committee. I'm Dawn Williams, Deputy State Treasurer. So the job application is completed, job description is completed and posted on our website. And the recruiter has begun his recruitment. He's searching for candidates and we are soliciting applications. That process will take about 6 weeks before the recruiter returns recommendations to us for serious considered candidates. So we're in the process.
I'll tell you guys, this is why I hired Don, because whenever somebody asks a question that somebody else could answer, they turn to Don.
And she answers in 10 words or less correctly.
If I can follow up, Madam Chair. So Don, thanks for that. So 6 weeks out, you've got a headhunters doing the work. Can you just give me a flavor of where the process goes from there? Who's involved? Is it going to be the IFC is going to be involved in this breakdown? Is it another group? Just have you talked that through?
Madam Chairman, Senator Gru. So the process from what will happen is within the 6 weeks as candidates are being procured, then background checks are done, and then phone interviews are completed by the recruiter. And then after that, the recruiter then forwards names for consideration to us. We've asked for at least 10 viable candidates for consideration. We'll review those suggestions and we will select folks to interview. The treasurer hasn't finalized who the committee will be because we'll have a committee of folks to interview, but it will include a member of the IFC. It will include some key members of our staff as well. And obviously the treasurer. When the recruiter, before he created the job description, he met with all of the members of the IFC I think he just met with Cecilia, the vice chair, but he has since spoken with the IFC and gotten their input on the job description. He met with all of the members of SLIB. He met with our team in the office, the investment team members, with our CFO, with our COO, all the C-suites and the legal team. So he's actually came to our office and visited, checked out what our culture is like, the office, to get a flavor of the kind of person that we're looking for, and so that he could get started on that. So he has really done some due diligence with meeting folks, and so after so we'll have those folks incorporated on the backside as well.
Okay, Madam Chair, just one more real quick. So just to make sure I have it straight. So the IFC has been involved with the headhunter and got all that, but as far as going forward, once you get to 10 names and get to folks to interview, the IFC is going to be involved with that, as is some sort of interview committee that the treasurer is going to identify. That still has yet to be done. But the IFC is going to be involved with that too. Did I get all that right?
Madam Chairman, Senator Grew, yes, that's correct. I think what the treasurer will do is, what we've discussed is he and I and our CFO, I don't know that we will include the CIO, the current CIO. I think that person will be interviewed with them, but probably not part of the hiring committee. We haven't determined that. It's going to be at the recommendation of our recruiter. He will also be involved, as will a member of the IFC for sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator Grew. Great questions. All right, with that committee and this interim topic meeting, again, as a reminder, that last item on your list on page 2, proposed interim topic, redefining income as earnings. You do not need to number that. That will be coming forward as an interim topic. And then items 2 and 3 are the same topic, so be careful not to number those twice. The rest of the topics, feel free to number at your discretion. And again, as a reminder, if you could email those back to myself and Representative Baer within the next 24 hours, that would be most ideal. Any final comments from the committee or Mr. Shaw?
Madam Chairman, I don't think we have any. Brian,
Yeah, Madam Chairman, just one note as a reminder, the interim topics letter is due Friday, this Friday, March 21st. It has to be sent to Management Council, just to put that on the radar.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and Madam Chairman, I want to thank everybody that helped support those 2 positions. We don't know what the governor's going to do yet, but it's going to make it a lot easier for our headhunter to find somebody to fill Patrick's seat with those 2 positions, because if we not got those, I'm not sure what we would have ended up with. So thanks again.
All right, thank you, Treasurer. Representative Storer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just inquiring about just scheduling our interim meeting and how we're going to do that.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sorry, just wondering how we're going to schedule the interim meetings and when.
So we'll get with LSO and find available dates, and then probably at this point in the time for select committees, it's really whatever dates are available on the calendar, and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
All right, with that, the meeting, Representative Baer? You're on mute.
I believe Ms. Vaughn actually put a calendar up that we could all, we could send it out to the committee, or you could look at it right now if you wish to.
Karen, is that true?
Ma'am, I do have a calendar. Would you like me to put it on the screen?
No. I would like for you to email that out, and people can respond back via email. Otherwise, we'll be here for another 3 hours. So yeah, if you could email that out, that would be best. Thank you. And everyone, look for your email from Karen Vaughn, and provide your interim topic list back to myself and Representative Baer. The sooner the better, but no less than 24 hours. If we don't have it by then, it will not be considered. All right, with that, the meeting is adjourned.